Episode 29 with Jason Stellman and Christian Kingery of the Drunk Ex-Pastors Podcast. Hey everybody, you're listening to the Never Forsaken Podcast, looking at the lives of the outcasts, the seekers, the never forsakens, those in or out of the local church and passionate about Christ. The show is broadcast weekly, and show notes and more information can be found at neverforsakenpodcast.com. I'm your host, John Robinson. Let's get into the show. Tonight I have drunk ex-pastors on the show, Christian Kingery and Jason Stellman. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Thank you. We are drinking, actually, right now at the moment.
Well, actually, in the spirit of drunk ex-pastors, I poured myself some Jim Beam as well. I didn't think it would be right.
Glad. Well done.
Nobody has to drive, so it's all good. All right, so basically, I know I've read a little bit about you guys, and I've listened to your podcast, and I know that you kind of both started out on the same path. I understand you were both in the Calvary Church and both involved in ministry. Would you guys care to share kind of that side of your journey, and as far as how did you get into Christian church, into ministry, and then we'll kind of take it from there?
Yeah, we were both a part of Calvary Chapel, the headquarters of which is in Southern California, or was. Is that still considered the headquarters?
Sure.
I don't know. But they're kind of a, they're a denomination, even though they call themselves a non-denominational church, but they've spread out mostly in the United States, but also in other countries. They're really heavily concentrated in Southern California, where they started. I grew up there, and this is Christian, by the way. I grew up there from first grade. My mom was quote unquote saved at a Grey Glory Bible study on a Monday night there, and I think the very next week put me in school.
Are you saying your mom's not really saved?
She's quote unquote saved.
I noticed you put saved in quote unquotes.
Yeah.
So your mom's probably not saved. I don't think your mom's saved at all.
I think everybody who's saved is quote unquote saved.
Okay.
So,
especially your mom.
Nobody wants to say if their mom is saved or not saved.
Yeah.
I'll say his mom's not saved.
Oh man, that's cold.
That comes from the 6 months Jason lived at my house.
So he's got to see the dark side.
Yeah.
Well, we go way back. So
and so I should turn. Sorry about that. I should turn off my email here. So I grew up in going to school and church there, and then I went to their high school and their Bible college, and then went on from there to become a missionary pastor for Calvary Chapel.
So total church kid.
Yeah.
The whole 9 yards.
Yep.
I didn't show up until high school. So I was a little bit involved in church growing up, not much. Was a part of an Awana program, which is a Baptist thing when I was in sixth grade. But I'd come around Calvary Chapel until my junior year. And that's when I got serious about my faith. And that's when Christian and I met each other. So that was way back in the day.
That's when you realized it would be the easiest job you could possibly make money at.
Yeah.
What's that, being a missionary?
I don't know.
Or just ministry in general.
Getting to read books all the time, talking twice a week, and raking in the dough.
Yeah, being a pastor was pretty sweet.
That's why you quit, right? You felt guilty about how much money you were making for how easy your job was.
I just ran out of stuff to buy.
Right. You didn't need money anymore.
So you guys both end up going into ministry, and you served overseas together. I hate to say served, not like military, but you worked in missions overseas together. Is that correct?
Yeah, we both went to Africa at separate times from one another, but we served together in Eastern Europe, in Hungary. So I was in Hungary from 94 to 2000, and Christian was there for most of that period, right?
Yeah, the beginning of 96 to the beginning of 2000.
Yeah, so we were both pastors of Calvary Chapels over in, I was in Budapest, you were in Debrecen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, our paths were very much identical, really, from our mid to late teens through our 20s. And that's when we got kicked out of Calvary Chapel.
Yeah. No kidding. So I'm in good company too, because I kind of had a similar experience as well. So what caused you to get kicked out of Calvary Chapel?
Orgies mostly.
What?
Crystal meth.
Okay.
Cocaine.
You lie. Come on.
AW Pink. That had a hand to play in it. We became Calvinists. Was what happened.
Oh, okay.
And we both kind of about the same time started reading some books that were actually available at Calvary Chapel stores, but that led us to the dark side of Calvinism. And we let the leadership know all along, Calvary Chapel is not the most educated church in the world. And, we had a guy who's a Calvary Chapel pastor now come over to our church in Hungary, and he told members of our church, remember, this is a European city that was entrenched in Calvinism, for centuries. And he told them that, we have a cult in California. They call themselves Calvinists. And that he's a pastor. That's a Calvary Chapel pastor. That's about how educated that they were, at least at the time, on the subject. And we let the leadership know where we're at. We said, hey, we're leaning towards Calvinism. And by leadership, we mean the very top people. And they were fine with it because they knew us, and we weren't these people who were going, well, we can't evangelize because we're Calvinists. And we basically continued to teach Calvary Chapel tenets and principles. And it was just a bunch of confusion, basically, and people being afraid of hearing about us who didn't know us and being afraid of what we represented and writing letters and getting us kicked out.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, you just said the word afraid twice in one sentence. It's like there's always, a lot of times my experience with non-denominationalism is there's a huge undercurrent of fear. And especially, you talked about uneducated leadership, uneducated pastors. And, I've had a lot of experience with that as well. And why is it, do you suppose, that like these pastors are afraid of somebody like you, me, questioning something? Like legitimately questioning, like, I mean, maybe you were being somewhat rebellious, I don't know, but it doesn't sound that way. It just sounds more like you were learning and evolving in your faith. And so you ask questions, and it's like that's a huge problem for pastors. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I think it's because a lot of them didn't have any formal education. They didn't have to learn the things they learned through hard study. And instead they were just sort of indoctrinated. They would listen to Bible study tapes from the main pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chuck Smith, and just learn to sort of parrot what he said.
That's what they would actually say. Is if you asked, what should I be teaching? They would say, teach what Chuck teaches. Listen to his tapes.
When in doubt, just teach what Chuck teaches. And so when your entire world is built on this foundation of a bunch of doctrines that you can't defend and you've never really heard challenged before, then when somebody comes along and challenges them, it's a threat to everything that defines you as a pastor. And so when you don't know what you're talking about and you don't really, you haven't had the benefit of having to really, buckle down and study and learn, when someone comes along and challenges what you believe, there's almost no other option than to react with fear, like you're being threatened and you don't know what to do, and so you sort of just lash out or strike back.
And Calvary actually spends a lot of time trying to inoculate people against these beliefs before they even are represented. They go around saying, if you ever hear somebody talking about this, talk to us, or
let us know. Bring it to our attention.
Read Spurgeon, but be careful about reading Spurgeon because while he had some good things to say, he was also a Calvinist, and so they kind of don't deal with the arguments for or against those topics. They just deal mostly in fear, in my experience.
Yeah,
sure, yeah, I get that. So. Like I said, that's been the same for me. Now, what I'm curious for both of you is where was the shift for each one of you? Where I know, Jason, you end up becoming Catholic, so we'll kind of jump ahead. How do you go from Calvinism to Catholicism and Christian? How do you go from that study to being agnostic? Because here's a big split for you guys.
Yeah, well, I'll go first. I'm the Catholic one.
Fine, go ahead.
God foreordained that I should go.
Let's flip a coin. Let's use the coin that Hillary used in the caucuses last night.
For me, it was I was about the most self-assured and smug Calvinist you could ever want to meet.
Well, just person in general.
In general, I'm just a total asshole.
There's nothing wrong with
That's
that.
why I was friends with him. He just made me look really good all
true.
the time.
Yeah, that's true. So it was the farthest thing from what people said about it when I did become Catholic, namely that, oh, you weren't happy or you were failing or the grass was greener or whatever else. None of that was true. I was very, very comfortable and actually quite successful in my ministry as a Presbyterian pastor. I came across an argument against the idea that the Bibles are sole authority for faith and practice. And
by the way, I was quite comfortable with you as a Presbyterian pastor as well.
Yeah, Christian liked it better before I became Catholic.
To me, it's all bullshit. So it was like, you Presbyterian, Catholic,
it's all
Mormon, whatever you want to be.
Whatever.
It's all the same.
Yeah. Can I say bullshit on this podcast?
No, you
right.
can't.
No, yeah, you can. If I just mark it explicit, so you can say whatever.
Mark it
man. It's
explicit.
Cool.
Every one of our podcasts in iTunes is marked explicit.
Yeah, because we get in trouble if it's
right.
Not, so.
Right.
So my faith in the idea that Scripture alone is our sole authority was shaken, and then I started digging into the Catholic view of what the gospel is and what the role of works is, and the relationship between works and faith and all these things that I thought I had all figured out years ago. But I started looking into their arguments and was sufficiently troubled by them, and started rereading the New Testament and seeing that. If Jesus and the writers of the New Testament had a paradigm or an understanding of the gospel that was similar to my Presbyterian one, they wouldn't have said half the things they said. And that messed me up pretty bad. And then I started asking the question, well, what paradigm or what understanding of the gospel would they most likely have had to make them say the things they said and write the things they wrote? And when I started doing that, it became clear to me that, the kind of people who would say the things that the biblical writer said are the kind of people who would have assumptions and presuppositions that are quite Catholic. And that's about taking 4 years of my struggle and putting it into a few sentences, but that's pretty much what happened to me.
That's the same for me, actually. I went from non-denominational to Anglicanism, and then basically they call that like middle road, and then all the way into the Catholic Church following a friend of mine. And it took me 4 years of discerning it and 2 times through RCIA to finally accept it. But then within 1 year, I've been blown out of the Catholic Church and kind of more along Christian's route. So I really straddle the whole, I'm like religiously bipolar. And so I'm curious now, Christian, to hear where you kind of went from that point.
Yeah, so I had 2 kids when we were asked to leave Calvary Chapel, and so I didn't have a lot of options as far as continuing in ministry at the time or seminary, whatever. And frankly, I was a little bit tired and burned out on it, especially since I had spent so much of my life in Calvary Chapel, and to just be kind of cast aside by them after not being trained for anything else. Really, I was. From the time I was in high school, was told the rapture is happening any day, and what's the point of going to college? And sometimes I was even told, what's the point of going to Bible college, even Calvary Chapel Bible College?
Well, but at least if you got debt, you wouldn't have to pay it.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that.
That's true. I tried that one too. That didn't work. I did have to pay it all. It really sucked. I just finished paying it all off. But it was just like, what's the point of going and reading all these theological books? Go out and preach the gospel, because that's all that matters. And time is coming to a close soon, and get on it, And that was kind of I believed it all hook, line, and sinker. And, I got married real fast, and I don't know why I had kids if I thought God was coming back soon, but I'm glad I did. I like my kids. They're pretty cool. So when we moved back from Hungary, I just got a job actually at a grocery store, and then eventually moved on to learn some computer stuff, just because I decided I didn't want to stay working at a grocery store my whole life, since that was all I was qualified for. And I just slowly stopped going to church. I went to church for the first 5 or 6 years. I went to Calvary Chapel actually for a while. Then I went to a Presbyterian church, a PCA, which I really actually liked, and I liked the people there. And it was a much different version of Christianity than I had been accustomed to, which I liked. They were at least seemed a little bit more open and freer, and you could have a beer with your pastor, which I thought was cool. but then around 2006, I just kind of stopped going. And really, I kind of thought about the fact that I had just been inundated and really indoctrinated my entire life from the time I was 6 years old. And so I decided I just wanted to get away from it and see what difference it made to me, and it turns out it made very little difference. And as a matter of fact, I felt like I became I actually became a better person getting away from Christianity. And that may have been
He's like, really?
Not by some Christian standards, I admit that. But it's
not by Jason's Catholic standards, I guess.
Yeah,
but I mean, I suck by those standards myself, so
But that doesn't matter. I can supposedly just go confess, and it's fine,
right?
That's what Jason does.
Well, I can understand that, Christian, because then sometimes I've felt that as well. Like I said, I've kind of got this like religious bipolar thing going on. Like when I'm kind of just wanting to forget it all and lay it all aside and just live life. And it's like, usually after I've listened to some Bad Religion albums, then it's like,
I've thrown out a number of Bad Religion albums over the years.
And then bought them again?
I actually literally threw the CD out of my car one time listening to it because I'm like, oh, this is so sacrilegious. I cannot listen to this.
I'll throw something away, buy it, throw it away, buy it. Now, thank God for digital music. It's just kind of the file always stays there. But sometimes, like I feel like when I'll give that time when I was in the time I was in the Catholic Church, I didn't feel like a good person. Let's say, so I don't know if it was like sin being exposed, and I had to deal with it. And on the flip side, like when I kind of was veering towards agnosticism, am I just hiding all of that? It's kind of a hard line to walk. So is there really like any event that kind of just pushed you all the way, or you found that after you weren't in church for a while, you just liked the way you were living a lot better?
I liked who I was more, not being involved in church and not, reading my Bible every day and praying all the time and thinking that I have this best friend who answers all my problems and everything. But at the same time, I also recognize that the version of Christianity that I was involved in wasn't the best representative of Christianity. And that's something I, think about from time to time, is that I was not exposed to the best of Christianity. I was exposed to probably the worst, which is that, fundamentalist, evangelical, non-denominational, bullshit, since I know I'm allowed to say that word.
Yeah.
And not only did it just not make any difference to me as far as, calling myself a Christian and not calling myself a Christian, but then I began to just have, what I would consider to be philosophical problems with the Bible, or at least my interpretation of the Bible, and with, the problem of evil and all that kind of thing. It just slowly, I began to look at the Bible and go, that's kind of ridiculous. We have a friend who was a Calvary Chapel pastor who we've talked about on the podcast before, how he was kind of just slowly losing his faith. And one day he's reading about the demon-possessed man or men who came to Jesus, and he cast the demons out, and they went into the pigs, and the pigs ran off the cliff. And he said he read it, and he just kind of went, there was just the straw that broke the camel's back, where he just goes, that's it. This is totally crazy. I don't believe this anymore. And became an agnostic or an atheist, And I think I didn't have one moment like that, but it was slow. And when we started the podcast, I think was when I really started verbalizing to people that I was an agnostic. Before that, I think I just lived like an agnostic and behaved like one, but didn't necessarily verbalize it.
But you guys do a great job on the podcast of not really being argumentative about it. Like, you express your differences, and so I don't know if that's just because you've been friends such a long time, but I mean, I find it with my own life, sometimes it's easier to get along. If I'm having like the Christian side of me, it's easier to get along with agnostics or atheists, even more so than it is to get along with Christians sometimes.
Well, I mean, the only reason we get along really is because of me. Because, first of all, I go easy on Jason because I feel sorry for him with his, beliefs and everything. But
see, for me, it's all about our podcast. If we if we stop being
strictly
friends,
business,
it screws the whole podcast mojo up. Yeah. So we gotta keep up appearances for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of work to split that up.
Our friendship's important to us, So I think a lot of Christians would probably frown upon that, and frown upon Jason, and probably do, in that he gets along. We have friends we know from decades ago who frown upon him for spending time with me and hanging out with me, and even entertaining some of my thoughts and ideas and talking to me about stuff. Our friendship's important to us, and if people have a problem with that, I think that says something about what they believe more. About.
Yeah, I get that. Now, Jason, do you think that like somebody, I'll just use myself as an example, that say to be Catholic and to just still struggle a lot with it and kind of even lean towards an agnosticism at some, on any given day, is that okay? Is that like something that people just work through? Because I know, coming from the non-denominational background, that's like no way. Like, you've got to have this assurance of faith, assurance of salvation. And the one thing I did find, like, in the Catholic faith was a lot more mystery, and that there was kind of this like gray area to really work things out.
No, dude, you're pretty much screwed.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
No,
I mean, what you're saying resonates with me a lot, because, I didn't become a Catholic version of my old Protestant self, because I could have. A lot of people I know who were Protestant pastors or just Protestants who became Catholic just found a wing of Catholicism that was every bit as fundamentalist and sure of itself as the one they left behind. And that wasn't my journey at all. Excuse me. Christian almost just spilled his drink in his lap.
Don't make up lies. We have to go to confession now.
I embraced a faith that is, like you said, much more open to mystery, also much more universal and non-judgmental and tolerant. And I think, from where I stand anyways, Catholicism is at its best when it is like that. When it recognizes that everything that's true is true, and you don't have to be on my team or have my exact belief system in order to understand and tap into things that are true and beautiful. And I think that it makes sense to say that a Catholic should be the least threatened of all believers, because unlike all of Protestantism, we don't exist as a reaction to some prior heresy. We didn't arise out of some controversy, but the Catholic Church has just kind of always been there. And if every Protestant sect disappeared, it would make no difference to the Catholic Church. And so, for that reason, I think we don't need to run around justifying ourselves and getting all butthurt and threatened by everything that comes along. But we can just, I think, see what's true and beautiful and embrace it and celebrate it when other people see it too, regardless of whether they play for our team.
Yeah, that's a good point too, about not getting all worked up about everything. And that kind of like plays into the politics as well. Where you see now this like marriage of American Christianity and politics. There's just this huge divide, and it's like, if you're a Christian, you've got to be a Republican. And if you're a heathen, you obviously vote Democrat because you like dead babies. And there's no in between.
Kill as many babies as possible.
Yeah.
But like, so where does that? I mean, that kind of plays along. Where do we find ourselves in the midst with that? Because I guess both of you guys are more left leaning. From seeing what you put on Facebook and stuff, like myself. And so sometimes, like, I know I'll get a lot of backlash from other Christians, especially where I live down in the Bible Belt in Kentucky. It's like, oh my God, how are you even call yourself a Christian? You're voting for a socialist?
Well, there's so many Christians who, it just surprises me so much, because I think that in principle they would agree with everything Bernie Sanders stands for and hate everything Ted Cruz stands for. But Ted Cruz stands up and goes, we get our rights from God, the Creator, and I'm against abortion. And they just go, oh my God, he is the candidate. Even though every attitude he conveys and everything he says is so anti-Christ, yet to them all you have to do is say something about God and be against abortion, and you're the right candidate. Whereas the candidate who doesn't want to fight war and wants to feed the poor and wants to make sure everybody's taken care of and has health care and all that is looked at as, close to Hitler, because they both had the word socialist in their party. It's ridiculous.
But even with like a lot of Catholics that I've talked to before, going back to the last election, I think I was still kind of discerning the church at that time, Obama's second term, and they leaned really right as well.
Well, Jason has Catholics after him on his Facebook page right now because he's supporting Bernie Sanders, and he's got Catholics coming at him going, "How can you do that?"
Yeah, yesterday I got this guy. I don't even know the guy. But I think he knows.
Is he a friend of yours, or did you post it publicly?
I posted it publicly. Okay. He knows me, and apparently he's got a friend request into me that I never answered,
and never will. No.
Right, never will.
But, he was like, how do you justify supporting someone like Bernie Sanders, who's so far from our morality?
He's pro-abortion, Bernie Sanders. He wants as many abortions as possible.
Yeah,
pro-abortion.
Right.
But he's trying to convince pregnant women to get abortions.
Yeah.
But it's just, to me, it's just. I reached a point where, I reached a point where I realized that the Catholic Church, for all its cultural liberalism, it can be just as kooky and conservative as anything else. And I reached a point where I'm just not going to be a part of that anymore. I started out my Catholic career, wanting to be a sort of conference speaker and popular writer and apologist for the Catholic Church. But it didn't take long before I just realized I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because it's going to limit what I can say, and it's going to seriously hinder the way I want to say the things I want to say. And and that's
how you've lived your whole life.
Yeah, I was going to say I spent so much of my life just like walking on eggshells, making sure I'm not offending anybody with anything I say because I'm some official spokesperson for Christianity. And once I became Catholic and was a civilian and not in any kind of ministry anymore, I realized, wow, gosh, now I actually have the freedom to decide whether or not I want to bear that burden anymore. And for me, I just didn't want to.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And I guess I didn't notice it so much because like my Facebook account is somewhat new. Within the last year, when I left the Catholic Church, I actually closed my Facebook account and started a new one, and then just didn't add like anybody that I knew. So
that's one way to do it.
so much easier that way. but So I guess it does exist. Then you get a lot of backlash and whatnot. I just really haven't paid attention to it from the Catholic side. I know I just get it from being in the Bible Belt here, where I'm like the only person, like at work or whatever, that's voting for Sanders. And
yeah, but for me, the way I look at it is, would I rather have a bunch of Christians looking at me going like, "You're not Christian enough for us," or would I rather have people who make no claim to Christianity whatsoever look at me and go, "Hey, we kind of like what you represent. You make us dislike Jesus less." And it's like, you know what? I'd rather have that. That to me is more of a compliment than having a bunch of fundamentalist Christians slapping me on the back and saying "good job."
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you on that. That's great. And so one last thing I just wanted to, I was going to address, I love on the podcast where you guys do your Bieber, and I kind of wanted my own Bieber, but I couldn't think of anything. So
what?
I'm coming
There's
up.
So much.
I couldn't think. I know, but I was thinking too hard. I'm like,
yeah.
What would be my Bieber? But anyway, that's pretty cool. I like that you guys do that.
A Bieber.
So what are you?
Small and insignificant that annoys you greatly.
Well, there's probably a ton of things. So,
yeah.
Especially living down here and being somewhat on the liberal side.
Yeah, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. Oh, I know. Well, we had
Kentucky.
I live in Kentucky, but I'm from Rhode Island, and I moved down here for work 5 years ago, and the cost of living is incredibly cheap. So,
I didn't think that was a Kentucky accent you had.
No, I'm definitely like a Yankee. What's that? A Connecticut Yankee in King Kentucky court. Yeah. But yeah. So I guess like we had a snowstorm last week. That was definitely a Bieber for me, with like 6 inches of snow outside and nobody can shovel and nobody knows how to drive or anything.
It not snow there very much in Kentucky?
No, not too much. I guess years ago it did, but this whole global warming myth.
Whoa. Let's keep the fairy tales outside of the show, okay?
Yeah, I guess they have real mild winters now, so I don't know. There's no scientific explanation for that whatsoever.
Interesting.
So what are you guys' future plans? You're kind of getting up there in episodes. You're on 80-something, I believe. And
yeah, I'm going to record 83 right after this.
Cool. And so what do you do you have any plans with the show other than just keep going, or side projects or anything that you're working on?
Jason?
We want to get better. I feel like we hit a bit of a plateau creatively.
Well, Jason did, and that affects me.
Well, no, dude, you were sick for like 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm still sick.
It just,
I know.
Yeah, it just messed up everything.
Yeah.
But I want to. We love what we're doing.
God smote me with illness for my sins.
That's right. That's right. We want to just get better at what we're doing. We want to grow. We want more plays, more listeners. We'd love to get some sponsors. Our eventual goal is to do this or some version of this full time. But that just requires a lot of diligence on our part that we just have yet to conjure up.
Yep.
But we love it. We love what we do. We just want to do more of it and do it better.
Yep.
Because you got regular jobs and whatnot too, right?
Yeah. Mine is the farthest thing from steady and dependable. And so if usually it's among the two of us, it's me who's more, wringing my hands over getting the podcast to be bigger, because I never know if I'm going to be able to pay the bills next month.
Yeah, it's tough. My goal is the same. I'm just trying to grow the podcast.
How long have you been doing it?
I'm on I just released episode 24, and
okay,
and I got like about 4. I stay like 4 or 5 ahead of it. Like I've already got 4 or 5 recordings. Like this one will come out in March sometime, but. So I'm a newbie to it, but just getting there and growing slowly, and working with some good mentors and whatnot. And it's funny because actually I hadn't even heard of you guys' show before I started doing my show, and I was trying to decide what kind of niche to get into. I got a really good atheist friend who's actually will like send me Christian books and stuff, and we have some good banter, good conversation. I'm like, hey, we should do a show together. And but
nice.
It never really worked out, just with time zone differences, and so I was like, well, hey man, I'm just gonna go and do my own thing and just kind of focus on people's journeys and just let it be real open minded, not debate, not doctrinally based or anything, and just like want to hear what other people are doing, what other people are up to. So I don't know that I'll stay on this exact niche because I don't know how popular it will be. I don't know, just kind of.
There's a lot of people that are kind of either coming out of religion or questioning things, or more open to questioning things than they have been in the past. That's what we've found anyway. We've got everyone from atheists to Calvary Chapel pastors listening to us. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. But man, I wish you guys the best on your show. I really love listening to it. I actually just signed up on Patreon today, so.
Oh, nice.
Get my little shot glass hopefully pretty soon. And
nice.
And I love the show. Thanks for what you guys are doing. And I thank you so much for taking time out of your really busy schedule to be on my show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
See you, John.